You bring your kids along
Oh,
with you in your interviews. How has that been?
I love having them there. I think a lot of people are like, isn't it difficult? They interrupt and they just shrug, they spill water and stuff like that. But because I brought Nathan to a construction site for the uncles at work interviews, he got to sit in a mixer. Yes, and we got to see a real excavator at work close up. And like, how many boys get to do that in their lives? And he's even gotten to sit in the recycling truck and the garbage truck. And they would only give him a ride. They would never offer me, but it's something that, my son can go on it. And he's having the time of his life. And that is even more useful in building empathy than me telling him, oh, what the uncles do and etc. Yeah, so it's powerful in itself, the experience.
Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Make It Work. I'm your host, Sarah Wong, and today I have an exceptional guest. We have Ames Chen, who is my childhood friend and a multi-hyphenate. She is firstly a mom of 3, and amongst the many things that she has that she wears, Amy, the name that I know her as from a child back in the days that we were in church, Amy, is a children's book author of 10 and more books right now.
Maybe.
And she also works part-time in church in a missions team. She works as well as a leadership and communications trainer. And importantly, she is very actively involved in the community, advocating for building empathy in society towards a lot of the invisible people around us, which is something that Ames will be talking more about in our conversation. So without further ado, hi Amy.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your story in 2 minutes or less.
It was very, very difficult becoming a mom. I was not prepared, not so much that I did not want to become a mom. So the backstory is that the gynae said that it will be most likely very difficult for me to conceive.
Oh, wow.
And so I was prepared for that. And after being prepared for that, and then 2.5 years down the road, having a very complicated first pregnancy, I think culminating is just a lot of pain. And when I got pregnant, we decided I was going to stay home, or one of us was going to stay home for the child's formative years. And that was, I didn't know at that time, but it was so difficult for me to stay home with one human being. Aside the fact that my kid is amazing, but nonetheless, it was just having no one to talk to, having no work per se, having no projects, nothing fulfilled me, to use one of the very commonly heard words in the other podcasts as well. Yeah.
Okay, so this was how many years ago was it?
Wow. Maya turns 10 this August. It's been a decade of this, and I suppose coming a long way also has its rewards. And now I can look back like, oh, look at me. 10 years ago, what was I doing? Yeah. So
Okay.
here we are.
Okay, let's rewind a little bit. Just introduce, yourself, your number of kids, how old they are, what you're doing, and yeah, what makes you tick.
Okay. Very straightforward. I mean, Sarah's been in my house. If you look around my house, it's reading all day long. We don't have a television. The children play open-ended toys. We're cycling, playing ball all afternoon while everyone is out at tuition. I have 3 children for now. Maya's 10 this year. It's shocking to me. And then Nathan is going to turn 7 and Olive is going to turn 4. And most of the time we spend in our home or somewhere in the neighborhood, out in nature. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, so you talked about the difficult period as a early motherhood. Can you bring us back to any very poignant moment that you remember?
It was especially hard when there were long periods when Jonathan was away. So my husband is a pastor, and sometimes night duty calls, and he cannot really run away from it, I suppose, because it's part of his work as well. And it's unpredictable. He couldn't tell me beforehand. So it would be hours and hours on end of just like, when is somebody else coming home? When is an adult going to be able to converse with me? And I wasn't active on social media at that point. So it was really just me and Maya and I all day long.
So how do you get out of that? What did you do to, bring you out or interact with the community and things like that?
I started writing a blog to her. So I started writing letters to her, telling her my struggles, telling her what was difficult, telling her what I also loved about her and what I was looking forward to do with her in the future. And it turned out that writing was really cathartic for me. Yeah, it really helped me to process my emotions, and it helped me to reflect about why I was even struggling in the first place. Yeah.
And now you have 3 kids.
Yikes.
Anything you would do differently about motherhood?
Olive came as a surprise. And we told a lot of
And does she
people.
know that?
Right. And it was such a struggle. And I think if I look back, that's one of the things that I would have done differently. I would not have been like, oh man, we have another child, it's going to be a chore, we have to restart the whole process, etc., etc. You know, because as it turned out, she is such a joy. And she was like the easiest baby. Like she'd just drink and sleep and poop and do everything like a model textbook baby. And it's just like, wow, you know, you could actually have one. And it was really, really such a joy. And she's been we cannot imagine life without her right now. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, if we can segue a little bit into where you are today, you are wearing many hats, obviously. Mom, writing, working in church, doing training. What are some things that helps you juggle all these well? Do you have systems in place? Do you have a support system? What is it?
This is what my friends tell me. I seem to have very few online hobbies. Like I don't do a lot of like Facebook. I don't have Facebook, or at least I don't know. I haven't logged into my account for like years. And then social media is kind of like a work platform, right? I post my books, I share about new titles. And apart from that, it's very, very rare. Yeah, so I think that gives me a lot of time somehow. Yeah, I don't feel stressed, or I don't feel like time is very tight at all, actually.
Wow, okay. Do you wake up really early? Because I saw your text to me this morning.
That would be
Pretty
Maya.
early.
Yeah, so Maya is a 5:30 before alarm clock, can I have my breakfast now type of child. And so I wake up with her, and most of the time I'm in a groggy state. She's making her own breakfast, but she just wants company. So I just sit next to her probably here in a day, and then she just does her own thing. Yeah, so we start the day at 5:30. Yeah, and you're right though, because the day just begins.
Yeah. So maybe you have more hours that way.
Not
Somehow.
recommended.
Somehow. You also don't have, I know there's like domestic help. Like, what are your support systems? Do you have friends? Do you have family? Yes. And I'm asking because a lot of our listeners tend to wonder, if you don't have paid help, or maybe you don't have family living around you, what are some ways that people have tried to make it work?
Okay, this is not sponsored, but a dishwasher changes your life. So I just recently moved into my new place.
Yeah.
And my girlfriends swore by the dishwasher. And I was just like, no, I've done without it for 10 years. I can do without it. And they're like, we're buying one. And the luxury of being able to read to my children or play Chinese chess after dinner is done is amazing. So we just earn ourselves like 40 whole minutes. Okay, apart from that, the children are very involved. They're very involved in, maybe I'll have a chance to show you later. They have these little cardboards where they fold their clothing. And then they have little brushes where they pick up crumbs and stuff. Right.
Yeah.
They do
It was
their
a hack
task.
that I saw, right? But like I didn't know if it like really worked.
Oh, I don't have the
cardboard thing.
original template thing, but Maya and Nathan, they experimented. So each of them, because they have different size clothing, have different size cardboard. And like lines for like, if it's a t-shirt, fold here. If it's a shorts, fold here. If it's a long pants, fold here. And they kind of like innovated it. And I think, right. And it's like a child hack even. So they got so sick of folding the laundry and me. So I usually just unfold it if it's messy.
Right.
And then after a while, they were just like, I'm going to solve this problem myself. Yeah, and so they kind of asked me for cardboard, and then they figured out, and they had to do a lot of prototypes. And they were totally fine with it. So it became a game. Yeah, so they do chores. They are assigned certain chores, and other chores, well, I mean, we take it as it comes. So everybody works in this home. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I think another thing that I've also heard is that when you are giving tasks to maybe say a spouse or even your children, you want them to kind of own it end to end almost. Is that something that you use?
I think one thing I learned from my very good friend, and you know her as well, Shufen, is that never do something for your child that the child can do for themselves. And it's like age appropriate, right? Like, so a baby wouldn't be able to feed themselves, like, for example, char siu rice, but they can feed themselves porridge. Okay, so really matching the task to the child and showing them, hey, you can do it. And you'll be surprised how much our children actually want to do it for themselves as well. And so that has been a parenting hack that I learned from a more experienced mom.
Yeah, with 5 kids, right?
No kidding.
Living overseas. Yeah. So, okay. Very interesting. Thank you so much. Now, I want to hear a little bit more on your books, right? And we have some of them, I think, over there. So, yes, this is just 3 out of the...
I haven't counted.
Well, you have written many children's books that I've bought, and my children also really love, and I've given away to a lot of my friends. So you're listening, yeah, this is the person who signed your book. You've published 10 children's books to date. You've covered many different themes, from writing about the Invisible People series, which focuses on marginalized individuals in society, like domestic helpers, migrant workers, and bus drivers. And this is Singapore society, obviously. You also have the One of Us, or is it Classmates? Right. Yeah, series about embracing diversity amongst classmates. So you've written a lot about themes that I guess many people, it's quite interesting, if people want to talk about more now, like mental health, making visible the invisible. So can you share a little bit about your journey as an author?
I tell this to all reporters, the newspapers, book reviewers, whatever, that I accidentally became an author because I did some interviews with migrant workers and street workers because of a course that I did for my master's when I was in Singapore Bible College. It's called Urban Studies. So you basically go out into the city and then you pick somebody that is most likely invisible, unheard, unseen, or in the shadows, and then you ask them their life story. So it could be anyone at all. And our group happened to do migrant workers and street walkers. And it was so interesting because one of our group's proposal was to write a children's book. And my professor was like, try it out. Try an actual children's book. So we wrote a manuscript, a base manuscript, and then I took over. It was more like, hey, you're the only one with a child, you do it. And so I tried it out, and the professor handed it over to publishers. And this is how the whole thing snowballed. Yeah, so the first Invisible People series actually began because I had existing interviews that my other classmates did. So they were all based on real life interviews, which then, I don't know whether this is going to answer the next part of your question, but the One of Us series and my classmate series about special needs kids in mainstream schools were offered to me after that. So rather than me going out for the stories, and a lot of people are like, oh, Ames, you're so good at looking out for the invisible, looking out for these niche. And I'm like, no, they came knocking on my door. They wanted me to hear their stories. And I was so privileged to be in their homes, get to know their children, hear from their teachers the kind of struggles that they had. And after you hear these stories, right, Sarah, you really cannot put it down. It's just like, another child needs to hear this story. Another family needs to know about them. And so it keeps snowballing on its own.
Yeah. Wow, it's amazing. It's kind of like how after what you've done now, the conversations are being started, and it's more than what you've expected.
Totally. Really, it has exploded beyond measure. But it's also very, very exciting. One of the moms in the interview, she has a special needs child. And I won't say which special needs because otherwise you'll know which book I'm talking about. She said that even if my story doesn't get published, the healing process has begun because you allowed me to share my story. And I was like so humbled. How can it be that, the Lord is allowing me to take part in their healing process when I'm really just sitting here and listening with a transcriber?
Yeah. It's so special. I think what you said about the healing process, starting out from stories being heard. What is it about stories and about maybe sharing it with someone else that ignites this healing process?
So you said that when you become a mom, a lot of things change for you, right? And I realized that kids dig stories. Every single night, it could be the same story again and again as kids. Gosh. And they will still be like, one more time. And so this is how Uncles at Work came about. Okay. Because Uncles at Work was a story that I told so many times verbally. I was just like, you know what? If I make it into a book, I won't have to, they will read it for themselves.
So Uncles at Work is about...
Oh, sorry. Yes. Uncles at Work is the third book in the Invisible People series, and it follows a little boy as he watches migrant workers in his compound, in his estate.
Actually, my son's favorite is
for sure. It's every boy's go-to book. For show and tell, they'll wear the construction helmet. But so about storytelling, one of the things that refined what I wanted to tell was actually, I don't know whether this can be said online, but it was actually in the Bible. Because I realized that that's how the Lord Jesus really reached the crowd and reached the masses. It was like parable after parable, story after story, and they were just gripped because they wanted to know what was the seed, what was the bird, what was the reed, what was the crop, and why did this king do it in a particular way? Why did the farmer act in a particular way? And I was just like, wow, the master storyteller was there all this while. And I guess that crystallized what I wanted to do.
Wow, so powerful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about that. Do you have any anecdotes of, your children or other people's children after reading some of your stories, having any interactions with people outside that they never used to before that you can share? Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the stories in the One of Us series. It's actually the first book in the One of Us series. So this one is about children with physical special needs, whereas the My Classmates series is a children with social issues. Yeah, so anyway, back to the One of Us series. This is about dwarfism. And I usually try to bring one of my kids on an interview with me. And the reason on my end is actually very shrewd. It's because children ask questions that adults have filters for. And it's so valuable because when they ask the question, somehow the interviewer themselves are willing to answer as well. The interviewee is willing to answer. And for short of nothing, I remember so clearly Maya asking, "Are you going to be this short for the rest of your life?" Because when they have achondroplasia, when they have dwarfism, they stop at about maximum 130 centimeters or so, right? So like 4.5 feet. And that's it. And she wanted to know, like, is this it? You know, you're an adult. How do you go about living your life at this height? And the person that replied her was so sincere and so earnest. And then the whole interview shifted to them. Like, after which I couldn't get inchways into the interview as well. They were just carrying on the conversation. And Maya started to brainstorm things like, oh, what we can do to help change the society for achondroplasia. What we can do to make things more accessible. So she started asking, what about the recycling bin? Can you reach the recycling bin? What if you live on a high floor and you cannot reach the post box? Yeah, so Maya started to brainstorm solutions of accessibility for people with dwarfism. And I was just like, how did the conversation pan that way? And how did she connect this and that? And so it wasn't so much of like, oh, you're so poor thing. Oh, I feel so sorry for you. But you know what? We can change the society for you to suit your needs. And I'm just like, this is what inclusion is. And I'm learning from her. And she was like 6.5.
Oh, wow.
Right.
It's amazing.
So I'm not really sure about what parenting hacks I can offer, but I have a lot of kid hacks. You know, things that my kids have taught me, and it changed my perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think it's crucial to cultivate empathy in young children and I think more so adult?
I think it's important for children, especially in Singapore, because we're very sheltered. Like, everything shocks us. If the rubbish bin overflows, it's kind of like uncomfortable. If the hawker center table is not cleared, uncomfortable. You know, so it's kind of like, why does everything make you uncomfortable? And what can you do about it? Rather than complain or rather than get your helper to do it, you know, what can you do about it? So I think more than empathy, perhaps going back to the original mantra of like never do for a child what the child can do for themselves. I think it's really that. So instead of telling them, hey, you know, be kind to people, be kind to bus drivers, you know, we tell them a story about bus drivers and they decide how they want to respond. You know, when they next encounter a bus driver, what they would be like. And because I live in a primary school that has 3 sets of my books in the library, I see them speaking directly to the bus driver and they would say things like, yeah, I read about you in my book, in my library. And it...
Because the number is the same.
Right, exactly. This is my neighborhood. And it inspires me. It's like, I'm doing something right for someone. And although it might not be a lot, it is someone who's making a difference for someone else. And that's way more than enough. Yeah.
Wow. Then you also talked about how you bring your kids along with you in your interviews.
If I can.
Yeah. How has that been?
I love having them there. I think a lot of people are like, isn't it difficult? You know, they interrupt and they disrupt, they spill water and stuff like that. But because I brought Nathan to a construction site for the Uncles at Work interviews, he got to sit in a mixer. Yes, and we got to see a real excavator at work close up. And like, how many boys get to do that in their lives? And he's even gotten to sit in the recycling truck and the garbage truck. And they would only give him a ride. They would never offer me, but it's something that, you know, my son can go on it. And he's having the time of his life. And that is even more useful in building empathy than me telling him, oh, what the uncles do, and etc. Yeah, so it's powerful in itself, the experience.
Yeah, and I mean, on Instagram, social media, I see that your kids have also initiated a lot of these activities and campaigns and drives to raise funds for whether it's like relief work happening in Myanmar or Thailand. You all went on a humanitarian trip.
Yeah.
How do these ideas come about? Can you share some examples?
Oh dear. I don't know where to start. They seem to be doing a project all the time. I can tell you Maya's current project. So right now, Maya is doing research on the homeless. So she's serving meals and she wants to write about the homeless because somebody said, oh, I want to serve the homeless in Singapore, like passing comment in church. And then she was like, her first thought was, there are no homeless people in Singapore. So this was about 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, there are, and we should go and find out. And so she started to read up, she started to look at newspaper articles, and she was like, oh no, all my friends think that there are no homeless people in Singapore. We need to do something about it. And she initially started by saying, Mama, you write the Invisible People series. You write a book about the homeless. And I'm like, no, but you wanted to find out about the homeless. You write a story about them.
Wow.
Yeah, so currently she's in the process of interviewing people, collecting her own stories and forming her own draft. So that's Maya's campaign.
So we can look forward to a book from Maya about homeless people very soon.
I hope.
No pressure. She has a lot of runway to go.
That's right, that's right.
For a
that's
lot
right.
more books.
Yeah, so
Wow.
her first book, which is The Runaway Dream, a book about refugees, that was very straightforward. So basically, we went to a refugee camp in Indonesia, but basically she saw students there. So I was teaching lessons, English lessons, and then she was just playing with the children as a child would. And then when she came back to Singapore, she was like, why can't we bring refugees into Singapore? I said, this is not something within our means, but we can bring their stories back into Singapore. So she started some Zoom interviews with her friends who were still in Indonesia. And then that's how her first book, The Runaway Dream, was birthed. And then she was just like, Mama, you don't need the money to print the books anyway, right? Because it's an ebook. So let's just give the money to them. So it's an ebook and then it's online. And then all the funds actually are channeled to the refugee nest.
Wow. That's really exciting. And I think it sounds like because of the exposure that they've had from a young age, both in Singapore and outside, that has opened their eyes in ways that many other kids have not had the experience to actually see and maybe even compare with what they have and then want to extend that love and generosity to others.
Perhaps. I don't know whether I started out intentionally wanting them to run any kind of campaigns, but we were definitely very intentional about when we traveled, when we taught overseas, when we did projects, we wanted to bring them along. It was just kind of like, for us, it made sense for our child to be there. Yeah, so when they went to the refugee camp with us, when they went to the villages in north of Southeast Asia and stuff, I mean, whatever we did, we just wanted to do it together, I suppose. And then now the tricky part comes because they're in primary school. So it's a little bit tricky, but we still try our best to find our way around it. But now it's the reverse. It's because they want to be part of it. Yeah, and they don't want to give up the slum children that they've seen for several years. They don't want to give up the Christmas party that they could run for the villagers for several years. So now it's become, again, the ball has become in their court. And I kind of like that.
Wow. So tell me about your annual travel kind of plans. Like, do you have regular trips like this?
Okay, this is where it is different. It's because I do it for work. Yeah, so part of my work in church is to mobilize young adults and children to the mission field to serve maybe in a humanitarian fashion or doing an English camp or whatever, bringing water filtration devices and so on. And so in the process of that, I get an opportunity to go, and my child, if they come along, they have to raise their own funds, they have to do their own campaigning and everything here, because it's part of my work, but it's not part of your work. And so if you want to go, you make it happen.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's that partnership. Yeah, but I guess it's a happy convenience.
Wow, and they raise their own funds.
Yeah.
So encouraged. I'm very inspired, very, very inspired about how you're really teaching your children empathy, which is something that I guess it's not easy to teach. In fact, you don't really teach, but maybe through observation. When a lot of the conversations that I'm in or in, I know that society is about teaching your children knowledge, bringing them for classes and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to this? I know that you say you don't have your kids in extracurricular classes.
Yeah. I think it helps that we are considered, at least by Singaporean standards, a lower income family. So there's no option. Like, if you can't afford it, you can't go. And so, as you can see, I think of it in a happy way. It's a happy problem for me because they can scoot, they can cycle and stuff like that. So maybe it kind of helps. But at the same time, with the little that they have, the allowance that they have, apparently their allowance is half of what a regular Singaporean child has. They want to maximize it. Yeah, so they're kind of like, I have 250, 50 cents, I put away for donation first, 50 cents I save, and then maybe I'll spend $1 myself, and then I'll see what I want to do with the others. So I like how they don't have much, but how they max it out.
Hold on, you just told me a very interesting kind of money approach that sometimes a lot of us adults don't even do.
Okay.
When they have $2.50, they give away the 50 cents and then
They get the money first, and then they portion it first. So tithing goes without saying. Your father's a pastor, do something about it. No. So tithing, and then they will have a donation amount, and then they'll have a saving amount, and then they'll have a spending amount. So out of this, they will do all that. Yeah, and then so if they feel that, like, for example, they know that it's going to be sports today, I'm going to be very hungry, they're like, can I bring bread from home to top up for whatever? Yeah, so there's some kind of forward planning. Yeah, so they have their own budgets for these things.
This reminds me, I read somewhere that you have a motto about living generously. Yeah, can you just tell us?
It's to live simply, to love generously. That's
I love that. I love that. Wow, so much to think about, really. So, Amy, you see a lot of young generation, young youth at your work, in schools. What are some observations about youth today that, number one, concerns you, and number two, gives you hope for the future?
definitely addictions. There's a lot of, although in the classroom they don't have their mobile phones or it's kept away, you see so many children fidgeting the whole time. And it could be during an activity, during a game,
Wow.
or when they're watching a small video on the screen, they cannot sit still. And I'm talking about like a 2-minute, 3-minute video, and everyone's just fidgeting all the way from primary 1 to tertiary. So the classes that I do as a leadership trainer, I go all the way from primary 1 all the way to even university, poly students, and everyone cannot sit still. Like, you must be stimulated, you must be entertained all the time. I think that makes me nervous, and I wonder what is going to happen in the future. But what also gives me hope is that when they have a cause to latch onto, when they see a real felt need, when we discuss things that are upon their heart, they can get so engaged and they are so passionate. And because of the sheer amount of information they have access to, they are also so knowledgeable about the cases that they have in their mind. Yeah, so usually when I go in, I'm doing advocacy campaigning. So the children or the students, they're thinking about, I'm really, really concerned about elderly people with dementia because I have a grandma with dementia. And then that personal element makes it so powerful for them. And when they talk about it, when they share about it, when they tell me their plans to advocate, wow, I'm like, I could not have done that 20 years ago. I could have not have done that when I was 15. But look at you. Look at the resources that you have.
Right.
And that gives me so much hope.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, on one hand, yes, there's a lot to be said and to be done about addictions to our devices. But at the same time, because of the resources through this and technology, that, yeah,
It empowers
youth
them as well.
and anyone really can have a voice and to stand up for something that the youth these days are latching on. So, yep, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So as we wrap up, what do you hope your kids learn from you as they see you juggling being a mom, being a storyteller, a book writer, working in church, training other youth today? What do you hope that they learn and take away?
This is something I tell my students at the beginning of every lesson, which is that if they do badly, it's all on me. It means I didn't do well, right? And if they do so-so, it's kind of like 50-50. Each of us did our own part. But if they did well, it's all on them. And so I think that molds me as a mother because I feel that my posture is I'm a learner. As I watch them, I'm the one that's learning. I'm the one that's picking up. I'm the one that's like, oh, because whatever they do and however they behave is a reflection of how I behave because they would have picked it up from somewhere, right? So when they throw a tantrum or when they argue, I'm watching and I'm thinking, did I do that? And so I don't know whether it's so much me teaching my children or them taking away something, but me watching them like a mirror and refining the person that I am so that I can reflect Christ for them. Yeah.
Sweet. Signature question. Can you have it all?
It depends on what your all is. I think that's the answer. I don't know what the other answers have been, but I think it really depends on what your all is. Yeah. And, for me at this stage where I am now, the all moment is when we're all in this couch together and everyone is reading a different book at the same time. That is like, gives me maximum pleasure. Yeah. So we're waiting for Olive to be able to read.
This is the ex-humanities teacher speaking.
You're already 4. What are you
Wow.
waiting for? But yeah, otherwise I'm just stuck on Sandra Boyton and Julia Donaldson's for now. But yeah, that just gives me so much joy. So it really depends. What is your all?
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. It was a delight having you. Thank you for
Same.
sharing your stories and your insights. Really very, very insightful and a lot to think about. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. And we will have some promo codes for listeners of Make It Work for Amy's really interesting storybooks that really ignited my empathy for those around us who I typically just pass by and forget. And I'm sure it will really challenge and ignite your empathy for those around you too.
Thank you for tuning into this inspiring conversation with my friend Ames Chen. For the month of May, Make It Work listeners like yourself get a special 10% discount off any Ames Chen titles purchased at graceworks.com.sg. That's works.com.sg. Simply use the code MAKEITWORK at checkout. My personal recommendations that my family have enjoyed are Uncles at Work and Bihun Boy, both of which are amongst her bestseller titles. Check out all the details in the show notes.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Meanwhile, here's to you, making it work.